Hello, everyone. Before we jump into the show, I wanted to tell you about our new YouTube channel. Just head over to YouTube, search for Schmidt List, and you'll find the new channel. With an estimated 26 million Americans out of work, I'm launching a channel to help you not only find a job, but help you grow your career. I'll be doing live streams, interviews, all sorts of things. So please check it out. It's at YouTube. Just search for Schmidt List. Now, on with the show.
Welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
Craig, how are you today? Thanks for joining me.
I'm doing wonderful.
So, Craig, tell me about what you're doing these days. You're at Three Bridge. What's the haps there?
Yeah. So working with Three Bridge, of course, around the whole Agile world there, but also, dipping into clients as well. So, having a lot of fun right now, moving into a healthcare product side of things and really helping them apply a lot of this Agile stuff to, the non-technology world. Now, granted, most healthcare products these days use some sort of technology, especially as they rush into the digital world. Delivering that. So, doing that, working with all sorts of teams, but also on that whole, this product of what is it that we're supposed to build, right?
Yeah.
Helping them figure out how to do that rather than shoot from the hip, if you will.
That's cool. Yeah, so that's where I want to get started with, Craig. A lot of times these initiatives in organizations start from some sort of need, right? They identify a gap or a weakness, maybe even a market opportunity, and they're like, hey, let's go build a thing, right? Yeah. Where have you seen people make the most mistakes up front? Where would you tell people to start when they see that gap or that opportunity? What's some of the first things that they should do before they go and just start building stuff?
Yeah, I think my best advice is to realize that you just adopted a puppy, right? And you're going to go walk that puppy. And where does that puppy just walks all around, right? But as you get more and more experience with the thing that is this puppy, your new product, right, all of a sudden it may become to kind of understand heel position and so forth. So I think that's the first thing of know that you don't have it all figured out. You haven't predicted the future, right? If you look at, the Ralph Stacey model of complexity, we try to pretend we can predict everything, but, that only works in the simple world. And generally, when you're looking at technology and building that and those sort of technology products, you are thrust into that world of complexity, right? You are dealing with not knowing exactly what you're supposed to build. And you're dealing with, I don't really know how to build most of this stuff anyway. So
right.
That's a good spot to start.
Well, and that's the thing is then people go and they brand it digital transformation. People create frameworks. Again, everybody's looking for the easy button, right? And sure, there can be an easy button, but what I've learned over the course of my career is that there's nothing really digital about digital transformation. It's mostly cultural and organizational transformation. Most of these large institutions, they get really good at stopping forward momentum because, especially, and you've dealt with this a lot, Craig, is in the IT space, is that once we've built a thing and it's up and running, I don't want to mess with this thing. I don't want to create new APIs and new channels and all these different things. I got it. It's running with duct tape and gum as it is. So now you want me to come in and make some big adjustments to this to create your new product stream or add e-commerce capabilities, right? I mean, in that cultural side of things, Craig, what have you experienced that works good, that doesn't work good? What's been your experience?
So, I mean, when you talk about, they don't want to mess with those things. But even when you're in the building state itself, right, of, how do I experiment, right? And how do I admit I might be wrong? And how do I find out where maybe I should go next? And that gets to that MVP world. And I find myself often trying to really help people understand what that V stands for. It's viable, not valuable. And so that's where you get that experiment, right? I build a little thing. I just did a little test, right? And dropped it out into the world. So that's the tough part, is getting somebody to build just a little thing, right? Because they want to build all of the things possible. And so helping them find ways and find that community that they can release that to and get that feedback, do that validation, is really the first real big hurdles that I want to get teams through, to get them that, that muscle memory, if you will, of build little things, right? And yeah, have a vision. Please have a vision. But that vision's like that puppy, right? It's going to kind of move around, and that puppy's going to really pull hard left, and you discover a nice little new coffee shop. So.
Yeah, and that's, I love that metaphor, Creg, because it is not only taxing on your day to day, but it is emotional, right? I mean, my job is changing. I'm having to be retrained, or this group over there is going and doing all these new things, and I'm not a part of it. And so I might want to stop and block some of those things from happening, right?
Right.
And,
yeah.
And that's experience you've had, right?
Yeah, sabotage is real. You're asking people to kind of admit reality, come back to more simpler things, try things, rather than I have all of the answers, right? On my laptop that I carry around, I always make sure that I have a sticker that says control is an illusion, because indeed it is, right? Even if you build the most perfect product and you think it's, and you've tested it and you release it out into the world, but yet nobody shows up, why is that, right? And so control is tough to have. Right. And so, but the smaller bites you take, the easier it is. Right. If you haven't watched season 2 of the Umbrella Academy yet, right, when the father comes back and he goes, but I jumped way too far ahead in future and I jumped back, but it was, and he says, just try jumping seconds. He goes, what can you do in a second? Right. in time travel. Right. And all of a sudden he goes, you could, conquer whole empires just by those small little bites. It's so true.
Yeah. Yep. And especially because, and you've had experience with this, Creg, is that some of the organizations that as a country, we need to change and get better at what they're doing. Like you mentioned healthcare, for example. And the way that these organizations are stacked, sometimes they can't have failure, right? Because that failure has to get reported to shareholders, Creg. And that's not a good thing, right? But part of innovation is failing, right? So right. What's your advice there? It's a really, how do you balance that accountability and that experimentation, but also on the side of dealing with the failure piece?
Right. So I think if you fail small, right, you're going to have a lot less exposure, right? And if you're keeping those people involved, those investors, right, and they understand where you're going and they give you that input, right, you like any good product owner, it's like, thanks for the input, but here's where we're going. Or thanks for the input, but gosh, that changes what we're doing next. It's important, right? And having investors is fine, right? But what you're really responsible for is, making a change. What is that outcome? And I think that's the other advice that I give is oftentimes we measure success in, basically circumstantial measures, right? Things like, code coverage from a testing perspective, or velocity, and all, the number of bugs and so forth. And as if that is, interesting, right? Or maybe we'll even do something worse, like measure productivity, which is number of story points per person hour, or something really silly like that, rather than measuring outcome, right? And the outcome is, you look at, any restaurant these days, right? They're looking at things. They're taking orders online, and what's the amount of delivery time they have and so forth. But the owner, what they're looking for right now is customer loyalty, right? Because they know that if they start losing that customer loyalty, that's bad, because we're not getting foot traffic, right? So same thing with the software world is, what does this thing do? In the healthcare world, am I getting people to engage and enroll in a healthcare product that's designed for somebody who has a chronic disease? Because they know that if they actually enroll in those things, the outcomes, right, the healthier lives, less claims that are there, and thus less expense, but more so the healthier life. Are you measuring that, right? So you did this thing in the software. Did that get a person to go through from a digital perspective of advertisement of this program and entice them enough that says, by golly, I think that might help me, right? I'm just recently diagnosed stage 4 cancer. Goodness knows I've been through that myself, right? And I didn't have a lot of digital content then. You just had to deal with doctors, right? I think my experience might be a lot different. than it was 15 years ago, say.
Yeah, sure. Well, and that's where I want to jump over to, because I think you're dovetailing exactly where I want to go, is your advice for product managers. So I've always talked about the role of the product manager kind of being this jack of all trades. It's a different role in every different company. There's really no set standards for whether or not you're more of a UX person, or if you're more of a sales person, or if you're more of a data person. And I guess sometimes the product can determine that, but I think also the leadership determines that. One thing that I hear from product managers all the time is getting leadership or their people on board with what the data that they're getting from the users, from the customers, the things that they're putting in there. But the leadership might have a different idea on what their goals and their visions are. What's your advice to those product managers in order to kind of build that buy-in internally, being able to manage up? Where have you seen it work? What have you seen work really well?
So I think, going back to those measures, right, of being mindful of how am I going to get to those measures. And a lot of that is tooling inside of the technology that you are building. And if you're not doing that and getting that alignment, right, with that leadership, that trust level is going to go down, right? And so with that comes more questions, comes more needs for plans and so forth. So, I love, Stephen Covey's, speed to trust and the 13 trust behaviors, right? Because those are things that as a product manager, you're going to have to know that, right? When we say stakeholder management, it's kind of this nebulous thing. If you just do those 13 trust behaviors, my gosh, you're going to take care of a lot of that sort of thing and building that trust. And yes, that's going to, I'm a big Scrum person, right? And talking about empiricism, and it's like, okay, here's transparency, but what is transparency, right? Is it 30% transparency?
Put a percentage on it.
Right, and so I think being very clear with people what they're looking at is really important.
Yeah.
And so that's, I find a lot of people that do the demo at the end of, the sprint. It's like, it's not a demo, right? That's not why we're here, right? What we're here is to gain feedback and plan our next steps, right? So all of those events in Scrum, they're all about a planning event. So as a product manager, what am I going to plan, right? Sprint planning. I have an idea how it's going to get done, right? Backlog refinement, not necessarily an event in Scrum, but definitely highly suggested, right? But what is refinement? Planning a little more. You're breaking those stories down and you're adding that acceptance criteria. So when you get that up into that higher level management, it's important to know that I should talk about the API, right?
Yep.
I should be talking about in context, what will this user, what will this person now be able to do? And then say, here, let's show you the thing that we built, right? And you show them through it, right? Maybe not necessarily the API, but the UI, but it depends on who the customer is, right? If your API is the product, right, for somebody else to use to fulfill your supply chain, well, that's great. But show them in context of, hey, what we built allows them to do this part of this journey. Next sprint, we're going to work on this other part, right? So think of it as, I don't know, buying a plane ticket. I can search for the flight. Cool. All right. Could I search for 3 flights, back and forth? Oh, no, not yet. That's good feedback. How often do you think people might do that? Oh, I don't know. Let's do some research. What have we seen?
Yeah, and that's the other thing and I like that the way that you said that, Craig, which was, I see so many of those sprint planning meetings just become approval meetings, right?
Right. Yeah. So the sprint planning is kind of, it's like, okay, well, we've got, these stories and okay, what's our plan velocity? The sprint review, it's kind of this approval. It's like, you're not seeking approval there, right? And nowhere in the Scrum Guide does it say that this product owner manager should ever approve anything, right? That says that they have finished it according to their definition of done, and they want feedback, right? And they say, hey, it's all pretty great except for this thing, it sucks. And then the product manager can go, well, I like it. And that's what we're going. I think that's the other side, right? When I work with the management, the higher ups of if you are having this person be your product manager, you need to give them the authority to do that job, right? So if I find that I'm working with somebody, so, well, no, I have to go and talk to Joe or whoever it is. It's like, then you're not the product manager. You're not that person, right? So maybe that person should actually be running this. You quickly either figure out that they're going to, cede that authority to that person, or they maybe try to switch somebody out, still play that telephone game. But it is a telephone game. You lose lose those things in translation because you've got this poor team or set of teams that's supposed to build this thing, and how far away are they from this vision?
And to your point about being lost in translation, nomenclature becomes a big part of just making things more confusing, right? Because what you were talking about, some people might call a product owner versus the product manager versus the product lead. I don't know. I mean, all these ridiculous titles where it doesn't really, like you said, who's the decision maker? Whose butt is on the line if this feature set that rolls out doesn't achieve the goals as needed, right? And to your point, sometimes that's the person above that person who's sitting in that room, right?
Right. Yep.
And that doesn't work.
It doesn't work, right? You don't have that person that has that authority, right? And that's the accountability. Those go hand in hand. Yeah, I always love the other word, autonomy, but that's really, the relationship that product person, right, has with the team, right? That team needs that autonomy, right? If you go and Google, autonomy versus alignment, right? You get the little pointy hair boss image, right? And it's like, what quadrant you're in, right? That will really help you figure out which kind of product manager sort of person should I be, right? So if that pointy hair, boss person is that product manager, which one do you want to work for? Which is good.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice, Craig, because it's something I've coached product managers on before, which is own your role. And if it's not being defined by the organization, define it, bring it to the organization, say, this is what I think this role should be. I think this is the power it should have, take control over it. But what I see too often is that they wait for the organization to give them permission to be a certain way, where I don't think you're just not adding as much value as you could be. And I don't want somebody going out and speaking for the customer and client that can't have the confidence to come in and say, this is what my role is, and this is what I think success looks like, right?
Yeah. And once you kind of put that on the table, here's what I think success is like, and all of a sudden you get to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. The fun part of anything in this agile world is creating that opportunity for a conversation. It goes back to what we were talking about a little bit before of like, how do we build something and kind of fail at it, and thus how do I have that conversation around where do we go next? I mean, all of those pieces are great for a team. So the best relationships I see are when that product owner is very involved with the team and understanding what they're doing and how that's meeting that need, right? That what versus the how, right? The product owner owning this is what I need, right, to get an outcome, right? And then the team really figures out that how side. It's like, okay, you can build it like this, right? I'll put the bathroom over here in your house and so on and so forth. The whole point of doing that sprint review is, hey, do I like that? No. I don't like that. Now rework. That's the fun part, right? Now, if I want to move the bathroom, right? I think, every one of us that went to computer science or something like that in college, right? It's always the first class of your first year in college, right? And it's a software engineering 101 class. And it's usually in the first week or two, right? Where the professor talks about coupling and cohesion, right? And we're all maybe understanding that we're away from home and we not, and thus we have maybe a few cocktails or whatever. we're at least, and not paying a lot of attention. And we haven't paid attention to that coupling and cohesion for a long time, right? So when we look at these products and these worlds, and oftentimes when you're in these larger companies, you're dealing with inserting a product in amongst others, right? Yeah. And then you need to work together, right? And so this whole coupling and cohesion gets out of balance so much, right? So now that when I make one change here, it is this ripple effect. So when we talk about this end-to-end, release testing, oh my gosh, how are we going to do that? And a lot of people can take this DevOps thing that we do, right, and say, oh, that will fix it. We'll automate testing. It's like, hold it. DevOps maybe isn't really about that. Mm-hmm. Maybe more about how we build resilient systems. Granted, the shirt I wore today, says anti-fragile. Mm-hmm. Granted, it comes from Kabuki Strength, which is a strength lifting gym out in Portland. But if you haven't read Nassim Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile, about building anti-fragile systems, it's an amazing read. And that comes back to these systems that we have clamored together. I connect with Matt Schulerstone occasionally. He had been doing chaos engineering at Target. He's moved on to, I totally forget the name. And, I love talking about chaos engineering because it is such an interesting thing because it proposes this hypothesis of if I am doing that right, how much end-to-end testing do I need to do now? good question. And a product person is like, ooh, that should shorten things up now, shouldn't it? I'm hoping you're thinking that.
Yeah, well, and again, I mean, I like the idea of it's going back to eating your own dog food, right? I mean, just if something's everything's going to have a chance to break. So, but again, it goes back to what I said is like in these cultural IT places where these teams have been built and groomed over time to keep the lights on and keep them on, because if the lights don't stay on, they get in a lot of trouble, right? But now you want to inject a new work stream, a new product, or these other things. I mean, that's really scary to folks. And a lot of times they'll either bring in consultants like you and me, or they'll just hire in a new bigwig that's going to come in and do an etch-a-sketch to the whole IT department or even the marketing department. It doesn't matter when it comes to this digital transformation stuff, right? In your experience, Creg, I mean, where is the best place to start for these organizations in terms of really addressing that? Is it do they start internally? Should they be looking for partners? Should they hire in experts? What have you seen work, or does it depend on the organization?
I mean, it somewhat depends on the organization and their readiness. You know, I always love the saying, "You're never a prophet in your own town." I think that's why most of my life I have been a consultant, and it's they can bring you in. It's like, well, our consultant said this, so let's try it. And of course, when you leave, they can blame you for all the problems too. But gosh, it's really tough to say. I mean, what the reality of it is the organization itself needs to learn, right? And it needs to learn how to do these things itself, whether you have consultants or whether you even have people. Because when I look at you, if you have an employee, are they any more beholden to you than a consultant, right? The consultant's reputation is on the line. Mm-hmm. Right? So are we being responsible craftsmen? Is the real question. Yeah. And are we willing to learn and try some things? And if it doesn't work, are we willing to learn from that and say, okay, let's adapt that? And that's, everything from this transformation world to, just the tools we select, right? We can implement a tool. I mean, oftentimes, I hate tools.
Right.
My hobby's woodworking, so you never have enough. But the simpler the tool, the better, right? It was last night, building a humidor and used a little plane just to camfer the edge. It's like, done. I don't need to set up a router. In fact, a router would have been impossible because it was too tiny of a piece. So, but
well, that's the thing is like people get excited, right? Because you start talking about this again. I totally agree with you, Creg. Like start with this small change, right? But it's hard for people not to snowball into what does this mean for the entire organization? What does this mean for our product line? What does this mean for our culture? It's really hard for people to just, I don't know, there's another word for it than time box, but like idea box, I don't know, that thing into that small implementation, right?
Yeah, and so that's where kind of, when you look at small steps, but you have to do the small steps in the right areas, right? Mm-hmm. So for organizational design, right, and talent model, right, how am I building these teams? So should I have, basically these component teams? I got an API team, and, I've got a front-end team, I've got a testing team. That sounds like 3 sprints before I found my first bug, right? Or do I move that to more vertically oriented and these feature teams, right, where I have all of the skills necessary on the team to build a working product at the end of the sprint? Right. That's one way to start, right? And then, looking at, okay, this is a technical product that usually supports some other product that you're actually selling, right? So usually in, like the healthcare product world, the healthcare product, itself is the thing that is sold, right? I want an oncology program. I want, these things, which are supported by, enabled by these technologies. And so, start there, right? But then you have to look at the funding side of it. Am I funding projects versus products? And then the more interesting thing is like product has been a fun word for a long time. It's like, when do we get to move to value stream, right? Which
right.
more than, right, is a set of products, a whole product line or interrelated product lines. But, how do you start that funding different things? And in large organizations, they have a lot of build your own thing, but then, let's build one ring to rule them all, right? These common components, right? So do I actually go out and find all of the stakeholders that I possibly can find and then take the 2 to 3 years to build that common component? Or do I just find 1 or 2 line of businesses that want to start it and run with it and deal with the rework, right? To go, we never thought about that particular thing. Let's incorporate that now into our common product. So there are many things to think about that. The other side of it is your governance, right, or your operating model, whatever you want to call it, and that's really where do the decisions lie, right? And with the organization working with now, I mean, I've had some amazing, senior management support at the C level, pushing those decisions down to the team in the way that they say, these are the decisions you must make. And I love that language, right? Because it's not the decisions you can make. Because if I can make it, I'm going to push it off to you, Kurt, because you can make that decision. I want to be safe from that. Let's make this decision. Okay. Right. And like, how do you size things, right? It's like, will I use story points or gummy bears? That's your thing. You figure it out. Right? When do I release? It's like, okay, that's a team decision that I must make. And so those are, push that thing as far down as you can, whatever that decision point is, and be transparent about what those decisions are that are at that team level versus any other level. And I think that's so important, because why would somebody that has a C in front of their title, right? I mean, maybe CIO, CEO, whatever it is, talk about story points? I just don't get it. I mean, like talking about
the room.
Yeah, it's like talking about the kind of oil I put in my car. I have no idea. I just like to drive a car, right? I have other friends that would disagree with me because they're very much car people, but hey.
Right. Know your role, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, as one of my partners likes to say, stay in your lane, right? And that's so valuable, Craig. Like, I think that's where the value comes in from the consultant side, is that you're kind of coming in non-biased in a way, right? I mean, you want to see the company succeed, but you don't have all the baggage with you. So you've got a better opportunity of kind of just seeing over a lot of that stuff, because you don't know that Carol over here has managed that spreadsheet for the last 10 years and we're replacing that now with an API, or, you don't have that baggage. And I think that's where it's helpful. But to your point, why did you talk about building an API in the first place? What work have you done to make sure that what you're doing right now isn't the most efficient it could be? You don't necessarily have to replace all the people or the way that things have been done just because you installed Salesforce and Salesforce is telling you that this is the best way now to process invoices or something, right? Know your business.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have in my life, had people ask me, it's like, can you just implement this tool for us? It's like, what problem are you trying to solve?
Yep.
This comes back to, I always love to joke. It's like, yes, I do have a wood shop full of tools, right? But I, unlike Norm Abram, I don't pull out all of the tools just to build a simple little birdhouse. You use the appropriate tools in the simplest fashion you can. Is the other side of it. When I start looking at backlogs, right, and we get into the agile tool world, whether that's Jira version 1, Rally, the list goes on, right? I find most organizations just complicate things dramatically, right? And I want my backlog and this backlog doesn't hold it. Is this a product, right? If there's multiple teams on a product, that's called one backlog, right? And it should have one decision maker, right? And so, but I see people slice and dice those things, and Jira is my most favorite to pick on because, oh my gosh, right? You need to know SQL, to be able to understand that, because these boards you can construct. It's like, well, show me this, but filter out this, and it's like, oh my gosh, you got to read that query string, figure out what you're looking at. Yeah. Where's the transparency here? Now, granted, I come from a software development background and database, so I can get there. But gosh, most people know. Most product owners I know that they don't have that skill, and should they? They should just be able to say, where's my backlog, right? And what portions are in the current sprint? Which ones are the highest order next? Does that still make sense?
Right. And then down the line, is that getting me to the new revenue stream that I'm looking for? How is that impacting the ROI or is it, or the customer happiness or success that we've determined is there, right? Like, how does all these things connect? And that's what I think is great about tools like Jira and Confluence and some of their the product tool, which is really great because you can do kind of a business model canvas, and then you can take take the business model canvas and direct it all the way down to tickets and say, like, this is where it's impacting this part of the business model and things. And I think those tools are great and smart. But to your point, a lot of times I see, because they're going to people whose normal job is to solve problems using tools, that they're not surprised when they come back with more tools to solve the problem, right?
Yeah, and as you kind of talked about, the business model canvas is all great, right? But right now in the COVID world, I'm using like Mural to facilitate those, and they're working well. The point of having that breakdown, right? You've got this business model canvas. There's this, Don Mercure wrote a book, the professional product owner, and he has this lovely piece in there, really talking about what is the vision of your product, what is the value it's going to produce, and how am I going to validate that, right? And that's kind of that product management vacuum between the organizational vision and what teams do. Yep. Right. And so how do you do that? Right. So a business model canvas is a tool, value proposition canvas, story mapping. I mean, there's just, there's a way that you can do that. And you can kind of set up some standards in an organization, which I help. I'm also kind of like, but if a team wants to kind of do something else, other than the business model canvas, they want to do a platform canvas or a lean canvas or an opportunity canvas, hey, try it out, see how it works. Are they getting the right conversations with their stakeholders with that tool or not? And if they're not, then stop, try something else.
And before you go to present these new ideas and all these big plans and things, or building your deck, I mean, just sketching it in a notebook and taking a picture of it and sharing it with somebody, saying, what do you think, is a great way to get started. Back to your point about starting small, because I see it so many times, is that, yes, I am this product manager and I run this whole thing, and so I got to put together a 14-page deck in order to get my ideas across, or things like that. I think there's a better way, even during COVID times, to socialize your ideas without having to add more work to your plate. It's okay to just use analog resources too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, granted, you're stuck in the COVID world, but tools like Mural and Miro and others like it, you can. It's like you can draw together at a whiteboard, right? Yep. Now, granted, I highly suggest using iPad or Surface or a Wacom board or something, right? Your mousing skills on a trackpad are still challenging to me to actually do the drawing on it. Right. But so you can definitely draw on there. And I've done that with some other folks who are like, I'll get my iPad out. This is great. And we draw together and it's wonderful. Right. Absent that, you can still just draw blocks and names and move around together. And, that's okay. Pretty good. It's just like working with Post-it notes.
That's cool. Well, Creg, I want to thank you for joining me today. I know you're a busy guy. So you're at Three Bridge. If I want to get a hold of Creg, if I want to learn more about the work you're doing and all that, where's a great place to connect with you? Where are you most active? And how can I find more about what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, you just hit up, Creg.Schumann at freebridge.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. So I don't do too much in the social media world, but
I can't follow your Instagram stories, is what you're telling me?
No. It's my friend. I used to have when I was doing a lot of political lobbying, I had a Facebook list of 5,000 friends. Oh my, I had to trim that down. I was like, I don't know you.
Now, see, that's product management at its best right there.
Yeah. So I'm down to a much smaller list now, which is great.
That's great. Well, Creg, thanks a lot again. I always learn so much from our conversations, and I really appreciate you and the work that you do. So thanks for joining me.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Schmidt List. If you like this episode, you'll love our new YouTube channel. Just head to YouTube and search for Schmidt List and subscribe. We'll be doing live interviews and career coaching weekly, so I'd love to see you there. If you're interested in how my company Foundry accelerates innovation, head to foundrymakes.com to check out all the work produced by our amazing team of strategists, designers, and engineers for companies of all sizes. And one last thing. Please take a moment to leave a review on iTunes, as it helps other fantastic people like yourself find the show. Have a great week, everyone.